Morning all. I thought we could continue our look at the evolution of chess style by picking a particular game in Kotov's selection in the book he wrote on Alexander Alekhine, game 19, where, interestingly and relevantly for our series, Alexander himself makes a reference to a player's own evolution of style, literally, quite literally, in the notes apparently. Alekhine writes later about this game, these attacks, based on the same plans in games of completely different character, are in my opinion very significant and could serve as material from which to form an opinion on the player's style, or at least on the evolution of his style. So that not only has implications for a player's personal style, but maybe for our entire series, that you can actually look at the ways that the king was attacked in particular, in completely different games. How was the king, in the Romantic era, it was more very direct attacks, like with the gambits, very direct, sacrificing pawns for initiative. Before that, maybe in the Philidor era, it was more positional. Then later stylists, we went back to being more positional, following the footsteps of Philidor. So the actual style of going for the king, it varied from being, very brutal to being more subtle, where positional play was emphasised. And there's almost a little bit of detail preceding this comment that Alexander made. The main peculiarity of these games lies in the unexpectedness of their rapid, successful attacks, which are always prepared far away from the point at which they are really aimed. In each case, they are preceded by manoeuvring of varying degrees of complexity in the centre or on the queen side, the aim of which is to lure the opponent's pieces away from the main scene of battle. And only then a lightning blow is struck. In all these games, a bishop move, followed by usually a sacrifice, leaving the opponent with no chance of saving the game. So this is also, if you read into that, it's also a subtle argument that you can play kind of positionally, even on the queen side, even in the centre, and because you're subtly luring pieces away from the opponent's king. So that's why chess can have, I think, maybe the direct attacking styles, or the more positional styles. They're just more subtle, but sometimes even from an attacking point of view, they lead to successful attacks. And even though this game, it starts off very positional, it's not a king gambit, but black is left defenseless on the king side later, and there is a shocking bishop move, and it's sort of all over after, very very soon after. So okay, so this is very interesting. And we're going to have a look at it now. Yes, let's get on with it. So d4, and played by Alexander. This is in the Triberg tournament of 1921. So a few years before their first World Championship match, which we've already seen. But we're going to have a look at their second one soon. But I thought this would be a good prelude to go back a few years for one of their early encounters. So knight f6 was played by Efim Bogoljubov. Okay, so knight f3, e6. As though it will be a Nimzo Indian, but after c4, well, it's Queen's Indian territory at the moment. b6. White doesn't put a knight on c3 to be pinned here. Instead, he carries on Queen's Indian style. g3, bishop b7, bishop g2, and then we see the move c5. Okay. Alexander actually takes on c5, giving as though giving black, a free tempo to develop his bishop on c5. But really, the bishop's often needed on this diagonal, against bishop g5. So it doesn't really matter. And also, it's a potential target here through later, as we'll see, a knight d4 to potentially to go to b3. So it's not brilliant on c5 if it's not really doing anything on the diagonal. Maybe f2 sensitive sometimes. But here, it looks as though it wasn't a big deal. After castles, black castles, knight c3. Now black plays d5. And he's temporarily blocked in his bishop. And we've got these opposite bishops here. And this looks a bit curious initially. I was wondering, it looked a bit strange when I first saw this move. and maybe there's actually better moves in the position, but let's go with it. Knight d4. Okay, so the pawn can't take because of the bishop, it's pinned, but also there's this idea that knight b3 might be quite good and useful for white. So here's an example variation I was looking at earlier. So h6, say, knight can come to b3 to gain a tempo on that bishop. Bishop f4, and look at white's position. It's very nice actually with these bishops. It's a nice looking advantage here, and there's no rush to make the pawn isolated at the moment. But say knight a6, you can make the pawn isolated. There's no rush now to blockade the pawn. You can first make it isolated, and then just after queen d2, no rush to play anything like knight d4, just put pressure on the pawn, and now maybe even more pressure on the pawn with e4, and this is a slight advantage to white. Very nice. Okay, even though white's got some weaknesses here, its pawn I think is giving white the advantage. So basically knight d4's got some bite to it with the idea of knight b3. I think it's worth looking at e5 actually. Pardon me, let's have a quick look at e5. If e5 kicking the knight can still go there. If d4, I think this is really pushing it. Oh, bishop takes b7. The d pawn can't go, so bishop b4, and that would be losing d5. So there's pressure with this knight d4. It's not seemingly that bad. Apparently knight c6 or queen d7 would have held the balance a little bit. It's still in white's favour, this move, queen d7. Okay, so basically I think black started to go downhill with his next move actually. Bishop takes d4. He's voluntarily giving up an important dark squared bishop, which means of course that any bishop g5s from later are going to be amplified without the dark square bishop defender. But not only that, the queen is pivoting from that d4 square to an important attacking square here. So I don't know if this is a bit naughty to consider this as part of evolution of even a player style, because it looks like a kind of rule of Steinitz has been broken in voluntarily giving up the bishop pair, in giving white a cozy parking spot really for the queen on h4. Were the pieces lured away? I guess they were. After d takes c5, the bishop was lured away from the king side earlier. But we're getting here a position which looks visibly, with white having the bishop pair, a nice parking spot for the queen, eyeing h7 rather crudely. This vicious bishop g5 is in the air, but a pawn is being sacrificed here to amplify these trump cards as well. So d takes c4. Alexander doesn't have to take on c4. He can just go in for the attack now. He plays rook d1, seizing the d file, and now bishop g5, chasing the knight away. So all the pieces are going away from the poor king. So I don't know. I think Bogo's mucked this game up already. But knight d5, yeah, we get the idea here that that there is a nasty threat already of even here potentially of bishop e4. In fact, let's have a quick check. So the crude eyeing of h7 is possible here. That immediately even gives white an advantage. Say forcing if f5 is forced, this is an advantage for white as well. f5 or g6. This is lethal for black because the dark square has been so weak. So basically bishop e4 is already in the offering now, but Alexander, he plays knight takes d5. Actually bishop e4 is given by Engine Houdini here as the strongest move, but knight takes d5 is another strong move. It's second down actually. Now rook takes d5, giving the bishop the e4 square again. So remember, there's this devastating pressure on the king's side here, and there's no defense. There's no defensive resources around the poor king. The queen's over here, bishop's over here. I mean, this is a justification for the positional opening. What are these pieces doing over here? Not really helping the king. And matters are made worse now. Apparently the best move is Queen E6. That would at least eye the E4 square to stop this bishop E4. But in fact, the move Knight B4 is played, and it just is completely lost now after bishop E4. It's interesting to note the different defensive possibilities here. So in the game F5 was played, but if we have a look at H6, this is quite attractive now how white can win this. Bishop takes H6, G takes, and I wonder if you can spot a winning move here if I give you 10 seconds. So I know I've kicked off with bishop H6, but a winning move here, 10 seconds starting from now, a crisp winning move. Okay, rook G5 check. It's going with check. So if it takes, Queen H7, and if King H8, then Queen H6. So that's one way of smashing black up after H6. And if G6, of course, the dark squares are fatally weakened, so you expect a move like bishop F6 to be crushing. If, for example, knight takes D5. Okay, so at the moment there's no time for Queen H6. Bishop's on. So bishop takes D5. Now Queen F5 trying to get that bishop would just lose the bishop on B7. Otherwise Queen H6 is really crushing. But here, let's have a look at another possibility. If Queen E6 here, can you spot a crushing move here? Going with the checks clue. So 10 seconds starting from now. Okay. Queen takes H7 check, and then you get this rook H5 check using the pin. Rook H8, so that's an attractive win there. So after bishop F6, what else are we left with? H5. If I give you 10 seconds to play a move here, starting from now. Okay, rook takes H5. So there's no defense here. If, like, you know, the threat is rook H8, and if G takes, then you can play Queen G5 mate. So after bishop E4, yes, of course H7 is a crude but very effective target. Whereas, you know, it's made all very effective because there's no defences around the king here. You can go for the throat if there's no defences. So basically, yes, in the game, the defensive try played after knight b4 bishop e4 was actually f5, and maybe, you know, Bogo had been banking on this, but unfortunately there's a very nice refutation here of f5. If you did move bishop back, of course you'd lose completely, you know, the rook. So what does Alexander play here? If I give you 10 seconds, try and see what he played, or you might want to stop the video here. So 10 seconds starting from now. Okay, as in many tower attacks, sometimes part of the wonderful tapestry of variations includes winning the opponent's queen sometimes with force, not just like mating the opponent's king. And here it's actually bishop takes f5 with the idea to win the opponent's queen. So not only forking c8 and h7, but after rook takes f5 he's winning the queen. Rook d8 check. The weakness of the last move is off the back row, so d8's available. Bishop supporting rook d8. So he won the queen. There was a few more moves though after rook c8. Rook d1, queen g4. Okay, so he's eyeing c8 and g7 at the moment. Knight d3. Okay, blocking the rook from d8, and also maybe sometimes I do a bishop f3. Alexander took. Of course, bishop f3 here because queen takes c8, so it has to take on d8. Okay, although there's a slight threat maybe in sometimes bishop f3, Alexander just took on c4 here. He's eyeing now the rook, and the queen's protecting d1. f4, getting rid of the f-file pressure. King f2, getting rid of e2 pressure now. Rook e1. Queen goes now to f3, introducing ideas like queen d5 check. Queen d5, nastily pinning the rook. g5 was played, and now rook e7. And after g takes, actually black resigned now. Let's say king g7 was played. The queen looks well, it's much more better than black's material here, but let's have a look at what would be an incisive continuation. Check, say here, take off a pair of rooks and get into black's king side. That would be an example, okay, of a winning continuation. Okay, so after g takes, actually black resigned. Let's remove the end of those moves. Okay, let's go back and just remember what Alexander said about the evolution of style. But I think it's a bit naughty because actually black made a few blunders. And actually Alexander also said the reasoning why you can look at attacks based on the same plan in games of completely different character, he says, are in his opinion significant, could serve as material which to form an opinion on a player's style, or at least the evolution of his style. The reasoning is very instructive. What has the fate of this method? Have later players used it, or have they been able to adopt it in their own games? This is Kotov speaking, really. Of course, the sudden offensive is the guiding principle in the play of a number of practical chess players. It is true to a large extent. This creative speciality of Alekhine was inherent in his individuality, but even so, the method of veiled preparation for a sudden attack has also instructive significance for players wishing to improve their game. So it was a sudden attack, but it does actually follow the laws of Steinitz and the accumulation of advantages, in that the bishop pair advantage was gained in this game. White was just collecting advantage out of advantage from the Catalan setup. The Catalan's getting very, very popular now in recent years in modern chess, and this is just a badly played Catalan by black, giving up quite voluntarily after d5, now knight d4, the dark squared bishop. You wouldn't have thought knight d4 would carry with it such venom. But if it's getting rid of the key dark squared bishop, then there's going to be loads of pressure on the dark squares, like f6, and a ripple effect on any defenders that knight is used to defending, particularly h7, but particularly if the queen also gets a wonderful parking spot on h4 here. This looks like everything's being put on the plate here for white to attack the black king. The only kind of complication is like giving up a pawn here, but it's often now we do give up pawns. Grandmasters do give up pawns in the Catalan, the c4 pawn, for a lot of pressure. So here there's a lot of pressure, and look at the displacement of the black pieces, and everything's like being displaced away from the king now. Even the pawn knight's been driven away, and even here bishop e4 was a move that was possible. On a lower analysis now, actually the engine has changed its mind actually from knight d5 to bishop e4 now, giving bishop e4 as the strongest. So but this is just a great move as well, knight d5, of course. So after e takes, rook takes d5, there's a lot of pressure on black here. So he tried knight b4, queen e6 might have been another option. If queen e6, rook ad1, white's still got an advantage. He's got control of d8. That's another key thing here. So black can't contest that d file very easily. If say knight a5 here, move like bishop e3 is possible. We don't have to move that because of the forking implications, I guess. So rook d2, and even here there's a menacing threat now of attacking the queen in h7. So it just shows you that the position is in white's favour. He's collected some advantages, and so the attack out of the blue, well, what defence is there of h7 in this position? So bishop e4 is a very logical move, and it's a benefit of the fianchettoed bishop to be able to play a move like bishop e4. We see it later in one of Fischer games, this bishop e4 in a quite fianchetto system. It leads to a crushing, beautiful checkmate. I think it's a game against Schoen, this bishop e4 with pouncing mating combination. So bishop takes f5 here is the nice little twist to win the queen though, for d8, using the d8 control. And the rest is like neutralizing black's play, black's pieces, and here black resigned. So that's interesting, you know, their early encounters. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that, and start thinking about this idea of a player's own evolution of style based on the style of their particular king attacks and the manoeuvring before that. Comments or questions on YouTube. Thanks so much.